Sound editor, John WARHURST. Sound editor, Nina HARTSTONE. Sound mixer, Paul MASSEY. Sound mixer, Tim CAVAGIN. Editor, John Ottman. And an actor named RAMI MALEK. Rami, I'm going to start with this reaction. I remember being on this stage with you about 3 months ago, one of the first screenings of this film, and then talking to you soon thereafter, and you said, I've got a hunch this movie's going to work. Here we are, 5 Oscar nominations later, $800 million, more than $800 million at the global box office. How many of you have seen the film already? How many of you? And 400 people, most of them seeing the film for the second time. If somebody were to ask you, as I'm going to ask you, what is happening with this film, how would you answer it?
Wow, it's a sensation, obviously. I think when you set out to make a film about Queen, you hope you can just capture some small aspect of the legacy they've left behind and that still exists. And one thing I think we set upon doing is just trying to live up to what they've achieved so that we could hold ourselves accountable with everything that they've been able to do throughout the years. And somehow, I think every day when we all went to work, it was about doing that band and this man justice. And that was not just from the actors and the producers, but this fine crew you see in front of you who this would not be accomplished without.
For the audience, we're going to really dive into the Live Aid scene and how that came together and all the elements that went into it. But Rami, I'm going to start by asking one broader question, and that is that any biographical film is essentially going to be a story about what that person did in the time period that the film is covering, but it's also going to be about who that person was. And if you separate the two, Freddie's a very private person. We know what he did on stage. We know what his songs sounded like. But as an actor, when you're starting to figure out what it was about Freddie the person that you wanted to capture, what was your starting point, and what were your earliest conversations with everybody who worked on this film about what you wanted that to be, the essential truth of his life that you wanted to capture?
Well, to be quite honest, I thought to myself, I said to our producers, if we can tell the story of this man, which I think is an incredibly poignant story that stands the test of time about, a man who is essentially an immigrant searching for himself and has something brewing deep inside of him that he wants to share with the world, and at the same time still on this path of discovery, but knows that he can do great things. It almost felt like a superhero story that felt very real, very human. And I said, if we can tell this story, and then at the end of it, we feel so satisfied by this film, then put all of the great Queen music into it, we will have a phenomenal film. So I just kept pushing, as we started, the writers to just, accomplish that. Get us a great screenplay that had nothing to do with music. And that was it. For me, it was just getting his humanity. I didn't know exactly how I was going to go about discovering that myself, but I started with all him as a performer and watching all of that footage, but inevitably I knew I was going to have to get to the human side of him, and that was through the music. Reading all the lyrics of what he wrote gives you such an insight into who this incredibly vulnerable human being was.
When a producer is putting together his or her shooting schedule, typically you try to get everybody acclimated. You maybe have a couple of easy weeks and you start moving to the big scenes later in production. What point did the Live Aid concert happen in terms of principal photography?
That was the first day. It was a shock to hear that was going to happen, but I felt like, from their perspective, they were saying, if you can't do this on day one, then they just fold it all up and take it right back here to Fox and see if someone else can do it, or we'll put it in the garbage can.
Well, we're going to go back to that day, that first day of shooting Live Aid, and we're going to work through what it was like to make the sounds and get the picture of that scene. So I'm going to start with you, John CASALI, about sound recording and about being on set and about the things that were essential to get as a recordist when you started production of the film and that day when you're shooting Live Aid.
John, early for me, showed me the proof of concept test shoot that RAMI did, and it was amazing. I saw it like, my God, it's Freddie. It was mind-blowing. And we talked through how he achieved that, and one of the things that we needed to do was record RAMI's vocals live, because that was going to make up part of the track. So we did that, but also we wanted to make Live Aid for the cast and the crowd as immersive as possible. So it was as loud as Live Aid, if not louder. And so, for a week, 2 weeks, that's what we did. So we were recording the vocals, but it had to feel like a concert. Live Aid, because RAMI was singing, he had to sing. So, that's what we did.
John, when you started work on this project, I think about 6 months before photography started, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. We started sort of working at how we were going to film it, how we were going to make it, and that's when we put together this proof of concept reel that John mentioned.
What were you looking for? What did you have to prove?
Well, just exactly how we were going to do it. Were we going to use RAMI singing along with Freddie, or was RAMI going to sing, and how we were going to put this, how we were actually going to shoot Live Aid and shoot all the different scenes. So the thing that we sort of discovered in the studio was we said to RAMI, so we were discussing it, we said, he's going to have to just sing. He's going to have to sing like on all of every single song. And I remember we were shooting Live Aid for 2 weeks, and RAMI sang like you can't believe. And obviously, doing this for a few takes is fine, but doing it for 2 weeks, I remember by the end you hardly had a voice left, because you were absolutely...
I said Freddie's voice is going to be very deep in this.
And yes, so we wanted to record everything. We wanted to get everything down that we could on the day. So that's why we asked John if he could sort of record all the mics. And I remember you all turned around to us and saying, "Are you guys recording this?" We said, "Yeah, we've got to record all this stuff."
People I think remember who watched it, what that concert looked like, and obviously your props department and your production design really recreated the stage. But I want to talk about the feel of being inside the stadium and how you went about creating the sound of the crowds and how you ended up getting the atmosphere of what it felt like in that concert space at that time. So Nina, where did you guys start talking about how are you going to create the atmosphere of the stadium, and what were the elements that you put into that?
Well, obviously we knew that we wanted to create a Live Aid that was completely immersive. We wanted the viewers to feel like they were attending Live Aid, not just watching the YouTube clip of it. So there was a second unit day on set where there were 600 people there, and who were being the crowd, and inspired by Freddie's kind of AO call and response technique, basically a Pro Tools session was made so that it would play a line of the song and then the crowd had to sing it back, so that we could record the crowd singing along with the songs without the music on top of it. So that was done with the 600 in between camera setups. And then it's those takes of that layered up gave us a big crowd that formed the base of the large Live Aid crowd that we had there. And then we used Loop Group, about 40 people, came in and we had recorded them to do the sort of the more medium-sized parts and the areas where the camera swoops down into the crowd and you see a smaller group of people and you want to hear them a little bit more close up. And we recorded those at Shepperton Studios in the exterior space. I didn't want to do them inside because it sounds so much better out, and I wanted to multi-mic them. And so we did them in groups of 8 with headphones on and made them jump up and down just like the Live Aid crowd, punch in the air, shouting, layered that up, and then obviously shot individuals as well. So you probably hear when you go into certain shots, people are doing little shouts or screams or shouting for Freddie. So we had all those individuals as well, and the whole thing all got layered up. There was also an app that John could tell you about, the Put Me in Bohemian app.
What is that?
Yes, that was a really great marketing campaign that Fox did, where they invited people to download an app to their smartphone and sing along with to Bohemian Rhapsody, and they said to us, "Is it okay if we send you all these recordings of people singing along to Bohemian Rhapsody? And is there any way you could put them in the film?" So I said, "Well, how many do you think there'll be?" They said, "Well, we're not sure. It could be anywhere between sort of 20 to 100,000. We were like, okay, that could take some time. So, but they said you can have as many people as you like, as long as you can condense them all down and put them in the movie. So we said, okay, fine. So they sent us tens of thousands of people singing Bohemian Rhapsody, which we then edited together and mixed down, and they are all in the Live Aid crowd.
Wow.
Yeah.
Before we get to sound mixing, Rami, I want to ask you a little bit about, we've talked a little bit about the creation of the sound so far. I want to ask you about the creation of the performance, the physical performance, and about how you work to capture Freddie's physical performance on stage. What were the guideposts? What was the breakthrough moment, if there was one, in terms of capturing Freddie's physicality?
I just kept watching him when I thought that I might actually be playing him. I said, let's see what he does on stage. I knew about Freddie, I knew a few performances, but I just wasn't aware of how he moved about the stage throughout a 100 to or an hour to 90-minute concert, and was non-stop and kept everyone engaged while he was doing every moment, every day, every concert, every tour. And I thought, how could he do that? Nothing he did was rehearsed. And so I didn't seek about meeting with a choreographer. Well, I passed up on that and said, I need someone who can help me be as spontaneous and as connective as he was. He would look out into the audience and make everyone feel like they were the one he was making eye contact with. And even his physicality on stage was as if he was making sure anyone in a 100,000-seat concert hall or anyone watching on TV, wherever you were, you could feel his presence. And that is something that is in and of itself his own. And to capture that, I needed to be as spontaneous as he was. We all know Polly Bennett, working with Polly Bennett. She was... She every day taught me something about what it was to be Freddie Mercury, move like Freddie Mercury. Sometimes we would use an entire dance studio and just either work on ballet or try to do moves as if we were Liza Minnelli, or we would do Killer Queen in the style of Marie Antoinette, and we would even have boxing lessons because he was quite a great fighter as a kid, and he was a champion boxer as a kid. So when you see him in Radio Gaga throwing out that fist, that's because that comes from him being a boxer. You know, Brian May will often say sometimes he would get really excited and just hit you in the shoulder. You wake up with a bruise because he could hurt you. Roger Taylor says if he wanted to bring you to the ground, he could do it in a heartbeat. So it was this mix of being almost a ballerina and a boxer at times, and being incredibly spontaneous, not only on stage but in the scenes. I mean, there were moments where I just wanted to surprise everyone, whether it be the cast or everyone behind the scenes, just to have no one knowing what I was going to do next, even myself sometimes.
We're going to pick up now the sound design of this film, and I think a good analogy to think of about sound design is imagine the sound editors, that you're a chef in a great restaurant. Your sound editors are scouring the planet for the best ingredients. They're bringing you all these great things that you're going to put together for a meal, and that's where the sound mixers start coming in. So I want to talk to you, Paul, about the ingredients that come into you and how you start putting the whole sound design together, mixing what the sound editors have given you, and what was your overriding concern for Live Aid? Because I want to really focus early on this Live Aid sequence and how you started putting it together.
Well, very early on, as soon as I got hired for the project, I knew that I wanted to try and recreate, in the music mix, recreate the actual space of these environments as the film grew, as Queen found their legs in terms of their sound, as they went into bigger auditoriums and ultimately into Live Aid. Didn't just want to do that electronically with the tools that we typically use. And so we managed to get some time at the O2 Arena in London. Queen was playing a live tour there last July. And John WARHURST and the Queen engineers managed to get a couple of hours of time with no audience in the stadium. It's about a 20,000 seat stadium. And we mic'd up all around the arena, 22 different mics pointing around the arena in the rafters and down on the stage and looking at the audience, and then played the big songs at full level through their PA, through their concert PA, and just mic'd what it sounded like in a huge stadium. So those were fabulous recordings. It was far more than I was expecting when I first heard them. And so one of the elements to get the scale as we progressed through the film, and certainly throughout Live Aid, was to yes, do all the music mixing, and by the way, we had all of the original multi-tracks available to us. All the instrumentation was separate, so everything you just heard was a complete remix from all of the fabulously archived material that the Queen has. But then I could utilize these recordings from the stadium in various different ways, especially in Dolby Atmos around the room, to create the height and the breadth and the distance and the perspectives within those shots. So, you know, one of the goals was to, once we were up on stage, we wanted to feel like we were with the band. So we're close to Brian playing guitar. I want to hear that guitar louder than it normally would be. So every shot, we made those perspective choices. And then once we got into the stadium itself, we could recreate that feel from real live space that had been recorded, not just the standard tools that we have at our disposal.
And Tim, this is a movie about Freddie Mercury, but it's also about an actor playing Freddie Mercury. So how do you make sure that as you're putting the sound together, that you preserve Rami as an actor, that you preserve his voice and what he's bringing to the part, because he's not doing an impersonation of Freddie Mercury, he's performing a part. So how do you integrate all those elements so we still get Rami in the film itself?
Well, first of all, I was in charge of the effects, and so basically all the crowd sort of that's cheering in between the songs. And what they said to me was at the beginning, what we have to do is make sure that we don't lose any of the energy in between all these fantastic songs. I was thinking, Christ, how do I do that? You know, you've got all these songs playing, they're so fantastic. So we had many, many layers of crowd, hundreds, thousands, and I had to weave those in and out of the songs and make sure that the crowd swelling, you didn't feel too drastic, and it didn't make sort of too much of an announcement itself. And all the time, the crowd is there. Every single moment of every single song, there is crowd cheering there, but you can't just have a white wall of noise. So what we do is sort of just have little pockets where it rises and it swells and then it dips. And all the time though, what we have to do is make sure that we don't drown out Rami's voice, you know. So it's a fine balance, you know. You want to push the crowd, but of course, Rami's voice is king. So.
John, when you're thinking about how you're cutting this scene together, people might have a memory of what that performance looked like, and maybe you're going to work against that, maybe you're going to try to incorporate it, but you're also going to try to tell narrative inside this performance. So when you're thinking about your editorial decisions about cutting the Live Aid sequence, how much were you focused on what you remembered it looking like and what the reference video is, and how much the picture needed to tell the story of what the band is doing on stage?
Well, obviously the most important thing for me was just to keep it emotional, and because it's the end of our film, so it's the thing that kept me up at night for a year, because it was the first thing we shot. So, you know, tossing and turning in bed, going up to go to pee in the middle of the night, let's Live Aid, that's what I'm thinking about. So, because if it didn't work, if it wasn't cathartic in some way, we were F-U-C-K-E-D. I normally just say it because I say it every other word. But I'd seen Live Aid, of course, when we first started watching the film. I referred to it, but then I just didn't want to watch anymore, because the whole idea of it is to tell it in a different way, not only emotionally for our story, but to be a fly on the wall or behind the stage, or there and see from a different perspective. Otherwise, just watch Live Aid. And it also had to service our story, you know, because again, it had to be emotional. And if it didn't work, you know, it was not going to. The film wasn't going to happen. So.
I want to come back to something I think you mentioned, is that you had access, because Queen was a participant in the production. You had masters of original songs. So, like when you're doing the scene of when they're actually putting together Bohemian Rhapsody, are those part of the original masters that the band has given you that you're working with?
Yes, I mean, you're talking about the Bohemian Rhapsody in the recording.
Correct, not a Live Aid, but actually when they're recording the song.
Yeah, no, John might be able to answer this a little better, because he got access to all of that.
That's so, to make that studio scene was a combination of the original multi-track of Bohemian Rhapsody from the 1975 single, but also because Brian and Roger were involved in it as well. We asked them, we said that the problem is that we want to illustrate the band making the song in the studio, so it's not always going to be perfect. So it would be better if it wasn't the perfect 1975 version that you always hear. So they actually dug deeper than the multi-track and found outtakes from the 1975 recording of Freddie's vocal, of Roger's vocals as well, and all sorts of things that weren't actually on the single, on the 1975 single at all. So sort of outtakes that have never been heard before ever. The other thing that was an issue was the guitar solo, because there's the scene where Brian plays the guitar solo, and then Freddie in the control room says, put your body into it. So obviously the guitar solo he'd just played couldn't be the perfect guitar solo you hear on the single, otherwise it wouldn't make sense that he'd just played the perfect one. So Brian actually re-recorded as a new guitar solo that was kind of like the one on the single, but not quite as good.
So you had to tell him to do it badly, which is gotta be hard.
It was very hard. Yeah, Brian is not good at playing things badly, but he played it quite similar, but not quite the same. So yeah,
it was also shocking to them to re-earth some of these tracks. I mean, when they dug deep, I remember saying to Brian, he goes, "I've found some of the first tracks that Freddie had put down of Bohemian Rhapsody, and they don't sound exactly the way you'd expect them to."
Did you find that, Rami, helpful to listen to those outtakes to understand his creative process? Because obviously Freddie's a very private person. He didn't share a lot about his own life. Were you looking for little nuggets here and there, and did those outtakes help you in some way to understand how his mind worked?
Very much so. I mean, Brian and Roger and Queen, Jim Beach, they all let me in on a documentary that they were making a little early, and you can hear Freddie and Brian sometimes argue about something right before a song is recorded, and you just get a taste of the creative process for them that was extremely helpful, because I mean, that happens, and you get the intimacy of just how brotherly they all were, that they could immediately go from a moment of just arguing about something. I remember Freddie saying to Brian, it was what is the American tour called? News of the World, right? And they were debating on whether to start the tour with the song "We Will Rock You" or end it, and Freddie's like, "Well, we can't end it with 'We Will Rock You.' We've been rocking them the whole time. If we open up with that should be it, and then we rock them." So to hear them go back and forth in moments like that that's.
I think you guys captured it a lot in one of my favorite sequences I put together was in the bar putting together Borat, because you guys did a lot of improv, which is both a blessing and a curse for an editor, because I get the real stuff, but then you have to sort of rearrange some things in the scene to sort of preserve all of the things they come up with. You know, or an actor will give out some banter, but the other actor's no longer there, and so you have to sort of weave something together. But that's what gave it the actors. But that's what gave it the reality. Is basically it was so off the cuff a lot that you felt like they were really there. You know.
We established the camaraderie between these actors is unlike anything I've ever felt, to the point where we were so close we could just throw out any line, and almost felt at times that because of this unique friendship and camaraderie that we'd established, that whatever we were saying almost felt more natural at times. And that it might stick. A lot of times you'll be improving in other films and you just know immediately that's never going to make the cut. But with this, I mean, somehow you found a way to make it work.
I'm going to ask you now about how the Live Aid scene all came together for you, Rami. People who don't know, when Freddie's going on stage, there's another band coming off. Anybody know who it is? U2. U2 is coming off stage as Queen is going on stage. When you, as an actor, are watching as a viewer that scene put together, the Live Aid concert, sitting out here in the seat watching it, what does it say to you about how this film came together? You talked about the team that made this film, where you've talked to the sound designers who put that scene together. Watching it as an actor in the film, what do you take away from the Live Aid sequence, Rami, when you see it on screen?
It gives me chills. I remember the first moment being out there and seeing that shiny piano reflecting the Pepsi cups on top of it, that Aaron, our production designer, had so perfectly curated. Everything was as I had watched it thousands of times, and there was this entire group of people who came together and ensured that not only were we going to, I'll say we emulate that moment, but we were going to put our own fresh spin on it without taking away from the glory of what existed on that day. And I just remember, I mean, I had the help of so many. I cannot reiterate what it means to be able to stand out there and consider playing Freddie Mercury and thinking you can pull it off. It's not without everyone helping you with every vocal in this, every instrument, every ounce of it I owe to so many people, including everyone here on this stage, and a phenomenal makeup artist, costume designer, production designer, and someone who was there right throughout behind the camera. And that's not just the cameraman, Pete Robertson, and a number of others, but Tom Siegel, our DP, he had this shot where the curtain gets revealed and I turn around and you see the audience. And that was a moment where I could just feel there was a power in this movie unlike any other. That, the look in my eye as I turned towards camera and set out to try to emulate one of the greatest performances of all time, it gave me faith, knowing that there was someone behind the camera creating these beautiful shots, and someone that would have my back through all the editing and the musicianship and the vocals and all the sounds. It really did take a unified group, and that's what we were throughout all of this to see it achieved. I mean, otherwise, I'm wearing a leather outfit and a mustache in the bedroom, singing along to Queen's greatest hits.
I want to thank the team that shared their stories with us: John CASALI, John WARHURST, Nina HARTSTONE, Paul Massey, Tim CAVAGIN, John OTTMAN, Rami Malek. Thank you guys, and thank you all for coming out.